So it's not just about Biden. It's more about this $15 an hour minimum wage. So um, there was a new economic stimulus package that just passed, and there was a large push by the Democrats to actually, as part of that stimulus package, um, to demand a $15 an hour minimum wage, which um, I, me personally, I think that it's good that the minimum wage is increasing. I think it's definitely time, but I don't think that it was right to do it as part of a stimulus package. Um, and that's why it got shot down was because it was actually ruled as not being as the Senate not actually being able to do that as part of a stimulus package. And so I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts about this. Like I've read so much about um dang it, now it's escaping my mind, but like universal income, increasing the minimum wage, and I'm really interested in it. Everything that I've read, it just makes me sick. Like um, learning that if minimum wage actually increased appropriately compared to 1950, the minimum wage would be like 23 something today, 23 or $24 an hour if it was equal. And we're just barely like coming to $15 an hour, which is kind of crazy to me. And most parts of the US it's 725. And so I don't know. I think that it needs to happen. I think that it actually needs to be higher, but there's been like so much uh media attention on this. I just don't see why people wouldn't want this.
I understand though there are the pros and cons, but I've heard arguments for not having the minimum wage rise nationally, um,
Mm-hmm.
because every state is different. Is the first argument, but the second argument is that I've heard, and I'm not an economist. I'm just regurgitating the limited information I heard, was that it
Yeah.
actually what happens is when the minimum wage rises, then small businesses don't hire because they can't afford hiring more people at a higher wage. So if it's like a small business that hires low skilled workers, usually the low skilled workers are either students or just people struggling and such. So it's like the I don't know how true this is. I'm just saying what I've heard is what happens is you're actually hurting the people that need the income more by raising raising the minimum wage. You do help a lot of people, like that's a given too, but you also end up hurting a lot of people because businesses have to readjust how they do business, especially when it goes from what 725 to 15. When it's if it doubles like that, yeah, small businesses are going to have to rethink how they do things, and so it affects the hiring process. It affects how they do business, which, yeah, maybe they'll end up adjusting and then rehiring those people later on, but we don't know. It's a case by case basis, I would say.
Yeah.
I think to
Yeah.
your point about what the minimum wage would be at if it followed inflation, is that what you said?
Yeah, yeah, if it increased appropriately compared to inflation and other factors as well.
Well, I've seen those graphs where it's like since 1970, since America went off the gold standard, like productivity has risen at a steady rate, but wages have stayed the same since 1970, 75, whatever. And it's
Yeah.
like you can blame the Fed, you can blame economists for screwing things up. I mean, there's so many different arguments for all that stuff, but I think it's also dangerous to if we just keep raising it, it's going to become a point where it's like it doesn't matter how high you raise it, it's going to be worth the same amount in the long run. And what I mean is like if we raise it to $23 an hour, then like the price of an apartment will then have to go up proportionate to that, and it's just gonna be a game of like raising this to raising that and trying to. It's like a cat and mouse game going up, 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 and then it's like doesn't matter what the number is anymore. Um,
Yeah.
that I mean,
Yeah, I
go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I totally understand um, that viewpoint, and I totally understand why people would oppose it because of those points that you brought up. The only problem that I have is that um, I think some of those points, if you don't understand the system, they make sense, but when you do understand the system, they really don't make sense. And most of what I've read, and I am no economist, but I do like to, I've read a lot of books about the economy, specifically about um, government, uh, financial regulation organizations, things like that. And I think that it's being controlled to a point where the average person really doesn't understand how it affects them. And like you said, if everyone's paid a higher wage, then inflation's going to skyrocket and rent's going to increase and things like that. But actually, um, with the opposite of what you're saying is that if people are not getting paid as much, then rent shouldn't be increasing and prices shouldn't be increasing. And that would make sense in a free economy because it's based off of supply and demand. But that's not how things are happening. Like like you said, early 1970s, our productivity is increasing, but the wages are staying the same. If like what you were saying were true, then rent wouldn't be increasing as much as it is. Prices as far as real estate, things like that wouldn't be increasing as much if it were really truly demanded by free market capitalism. But
Yeah,
there's so much influence by governmental regulation, regulatory organizations, individual corporations that can literally just like flood the economy with money and then cause more inflation. And so,
I
yeah,
think I think you unintentionally made a libertarian counterpoint. Maybe if you didn't even know it, that the government has done too much regulation, too much something that has then it's action and reaction. If you regulate something, something is going to have to be adjusted. So yeah, regulation is good in some aspects, like environmental regulation and stuff. But then, like what's going on in California, where it's like everything is regulated to death. Of
hmm
course, like one bedroom houses are going to be like $1 million then because you have to readjust based on those regulations and such. And
yeah,
so, yeah, like we said, we're not economists, but we can understand like if there's an action, there's a reaction. And so, if it
sure.
if there's a regulation that or something that is affecting the price of the house, then what the libertarian or conservative would say is get rid of that regulation. But then that's a slippery slope of how much do you get rid of, and that's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah, and I think that regulation is not the right word. I think that uh, reaction is a better word because corporations do the exact same thing. Just like what I said, they'll intentionally flood the market with certain types of money to to actually increase their stock price and things like that, which have nothing to do with the actual um, base tenets of like a free market capitalist society. And so they're affecting the economy in negative ways, and I think it's a combination. But yeah, it's I think it's an interesting topic. $15 an hour minimum wage. I know Andrew Yang was really popular with talking about universal income. I think the most important thing to look at here is there's obviously some issues that still need to be worked out.
Yeah, I think it's a very simplistic thing to say. Just raise it and all matters are settled. Like raise it and
Oh
everybody's gonna be
yeah,
okay. Like
yeah,
it's a much deeper and complicated topic than us just saying, yeah, you get more money, you're happier. It's like it doesn't
oh
work that
yeah,
way.
yeah, for sure.
And what I just realized too is if people are getting paid more money, they're also having to pay more taxes as well. So that's something to also think about. Like keep that in the back of your mind as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.